I want to introduce our turner, or not the turner, but the open segments design by one of our top turning members of the club and also a past president of the club, Bob Robinson.
Good evening. All right. All right, first thing first. There's a closed segment bowl, which, you know, what Fred brought tonight. And was it 290 some pieces, you said, Fred? 242. Okay. Basically, for doing that and doing this, it's the same procedure, except I got holes in this. And it's a very simple thing to do if you have a couple easy tools. Okay. The mathematics, you can make it as difficult as you want to make it, or you can make it as simple as you want to make it. Okay? Why do we do open segments or a closed segment? Basically, it saves a ton of wood. You know, if you're going to do layered wood, let's say a piece of black walnut, a piece of cherry, and a piece of yellow heart, and you use that whole board to make a 10-inch bowl, that center core is going to be scrap. I mean, it's basically turned out into sawdust, which doesn't go to waste. You can put it in your garden if you want. But it's basically, you know, at $9 or $10 a board foot for yellow heart, you're throwing away a lot of good money. So if you do the segmented turning, then you basically use, you know, a small piece of wood to make up these rings. Pretty easy to come to that conclusion. It's fun to do. All right. So now the disadvantages, and you know, the only disadvantage I can think of is the time lapse from when you start this till you finish it. Most of the time lapse is in the glue up. You know, Fred does it in 2-hour segments, I think you said. I do it in 4-hour segments because I'm usually doing something else and I just forget about it. But I can usually do 3 rings a day. All right, and that's about where I try to get to. But I'm usually doing 2 or 3 or 4 of these at a time, so I'm, you know, accomplishing it quite a bit. All right. The only other disadvantage is the expense to buy the jig for open segment, and I really forgot. This like 60 some bucks, I think. This is 18 divisions. You can buy one for 24 divisions, which gets you a obviously smaller thing. One of the other advantages of open segment versus closed segment, if you remember the one I did on closed segments, I had a calculation sheet that, you know, showed all the different diameters and how you used, if the size of the bowl was 5 inches, you took the circumference times 3.142, divided it by the number of segments you want per ring, 6, 12, or 18. It gives you the segment length, and then you multiply the number of segments to get the length of the board that you're going to cut. Well, with open segments, it's all 8 degrees. You don't have to worry about it's, you know, 15 degrees or 30 or 60. It's all 8 degrees. Until you get to the top ring, and this has 18 segments. Okay, so these are 10 degrees. All right, 10 degrees on each side, which makes up the 20, and 20 times the 18 is a, you know, diameter is 360. All right, so now we've solved that. These 2 books I have found to be the best for, you know, reading and getting the details. it really is something that if you read it once, it pretty well clicks. You don't have to keep going back over it. Most of the time, I do not use the designs in the books because I just goes against my grain. I like to do whatever I want to do freeform. But this one I did from this chart. They already have all my lengths and widths and all that done for me. So I don't have to spend half a day calculating all this stuff. All right. Now, when I say width and length, what do I mean? You got to calculate the length of the board. If each of these pieces is going to be 2 inches, and I'm just exaggerating, and I have that times 2, okay, that gives me 36 inches that I need here. But that isn't really true because you need a little slough. Because when you get down here you got a piece of wood about that big, you don't want your finger down there holding it. So I always allow about another 8 inches, okay? If I'm doing repetitive work, which I do often, because I never make one of anything, then I do basically take a board and I cut the width, this piece, to know what I need, and on that board I mark the width from here to here, right, and the length, and I put on there board row number 4. So if you counted up 4 rows, that was a piece of wood I used to cut that. Okay. I keep these so if I go back I don't have to remeasure this thing, because getting it at 1.696 with this seems real simple until you try to get to the 0.6. You know, you play with it for 5 minutes to get it where you want it because it moves pretty rapidly. But this is something you have to have if you're going to go this route. So all of these and all this was done to this point, whatever, you know, measurement. The easiest way to do it is the way I do it normally, is I just start, you know, say I'm going to have a base of 6 inch bowl. So I go to 6.5 for my first ring. All right. And then I just take and set, pardon me, on the table saw, and you all saw it if you were in my shop. It's a 90-degree angle board that's 5 inches from the fence to the blade. So 0 would be 5 inches on my gauge on the, you know, on my measurement bar. If I want to do a 1 inch segment, okay, this length 1 inch, I just move it to 6 inches. Once I get that base, then I add a 1/16 each time until I get the rows I want. And that gives me the capability to do this. All right, so and it's all 8 degrees because it's open segment. So I don't have to worry with doing this 0.69954. And it turns out to be basically the same thing. You can make it any shape. Now, with this, if you notice, when I get to this top ring, all right, I don't have a heck of a lot to play with. So if I'm making this a sweeping piece, and there's another row that goes on top of this, then I've got to be very careful when I do the sweep. I can't get any catches or screw up. I like them this thin. Most people don't go that thin. I like it. I think it looks better than a thick wall. You probably have a bigger loss factor if you get a catch when you get down to this. Okay. So how do we go about the whole thing? All right. You got to select the style bowl you want. You know, if you want it like, if Fred did that as an open segment, you know, he had to figure out what he wanted to do. What I do is I draw up, this is, you know, 12 piece per row. This is, instead of 18 segments, this is 12. And I decided I want that design. So the dark color is the design of what I want to be on the side of the bowl. So you can make it anything you want. You got to remember, you only have 16 segments going this way. So you got to lay it out so that it comes out when you turn it in a roll. You can get it on 4 sides, you can get it on 2 sides or 1 side. So this is just something I play with when I'm watching TV. There's not much on TV. A better one would be this design, which is just the diamond. So in here, I would be picking, laying out the diamond with different colored woods. So that's what this bag would be. And this is row 1, ring 1 of the next one I'm going to turn. And there's yellow heart, purple heart, and maple and black walnut. So you can pass that around. So once you select your design and that, then you have to figure out how many pieces. You need a yellow heart per row, and it changes as you go up. Obviously, the first row you're going to start, you only have 1 4 times if you want it 4 times around the bowl. So as it goes up, it changes. Truly, the hardest part to get ready to do this is the mill work, to decide what you want, how you're going to cut your starting pieces. Do you want it 3/4 of an inch? Do you want it a 1/2 inch? Do you want it 1/4 inch? Sometimes when I do them, I make 3/4 inch couple rows. I'll do a 1/2 inch row thickness, and at the top I make them 1/4 inch row. And just because it changes the design. Nothing, it's not mandatory. Okay. One of the tricks I use is when I get this full length, if you notice, there's a pencil scratch on there all the way across the wood. After I sand both sides of this on my big belt sander, Performax, then I just take and scratch this line across. Because when I'm doing this cut, and let's say I want 8 segments, so I go down to my 8 segment center, lock this down, and that's done. Okay. In an open segment, it's not as critical to be exactly 8 degrees. You can be 8.0005. It's not going to affect too much. In a closed segment, you have to be dead on. Because when you do it, if you had 18 segments, you would take 9 of them and you lay them in a half moon. And as long as both sides are flush against the wood, you're fine. If not, then you got to adjust it to cut. With this doobie board, it's so calculated when I put it together that I know what I want is dead on that number. It never has failed me. But it takes a good day to figure out this adjustment to make sure this sits where you want it. Okay? Once that's done, you're done. All right. So once you do that, get it sanded and scratch on the top, then I take it to the doobie board and I decide at 16 segments I need to cut 16 of these pieces. Now how do we determine length and the width? The width is determined by this piece I've already cut, right? Because that's going to be this is row 8, so that's row 8. Okay, so I've already cut this on the table saw, so I know my widths are what I want. They all vary when you're doing a fruit basket. So now that I have that, my pencil mark on top, I start out with the wood, go through and pop off a piece, then you turn it over and do the other side. When you go to put these together, which means placing them on this ring, which we're going to do with this, okay, then all I do is take these, I marked it with a pencil mark, okay, I want that face down, okay, and I'll just sit and put all these. By the way, in the meantime, if you got any little piece of wood there, you just take and scratch it on the sandpaper to knock off any pieces like that. All right, now why do I put the pencil mark down? I know both sides have been sanded flat, right? That's obvious. When I'm doing this and I go to put it onto the pieces I've already glued up, you may get a little variation. So what you do, once you get the ring glued in place, before you start the next layer, you go back to this piece And on my lathe I have a ring with a Velcro piece on it, 12-inch sanding ring, or a pad I should call it. Okay. While I'm talking, I'm putting them in backwards, which really wouldn't matter, but just to tell you. Okay. So I get all those loaded in. Now to hold this in place, because as I set this up, they have a tendency to drop out. So that's the purpose of the rubber band. Okay. So you can see, sometimes it's fun to try. This is when I call my wife over to the shop and please give me a hand, right? So you get all this around, and that's what happens. Okay, I exaggerated that, sorry, I didn't mean to hit anybody. But that happens. So you do need another set of hands. So you get that done. Okay. This is sitting on the lathe, or I use a press, I don't put these on. So this is on the lathe, spinning, if I can spin it. I take the sanding ring, that's just a disc like this with sandpaper on it, and I hold it against this as this is spinning. This guarantees me that I'm going to have a level surface for the next layer. It looks level, and if I sat this on there now, it probably is good and level. But that's why I put the pencil marks on there, because when those pencil marks are gone, I know I've sanded everything level, or hopefully it's level. All right. Now, you can take, and I'm going to take these off so I don't shoot anybody else again. Okay. You can take this is the center of it, put it up against your tailstock, shove it forward, okay, and it would meet up with this piece. Okay, and this guarantees you that it's going to match up and center itself. Now you got to leave it there for 2 hours. All right, I am not one to tie the lathe up for 2 hours. I much prefer to take this over to my 2 presses you saw that I had in the shop and sit that on the press face up or face down, either one. Take the glued up pieces and put on the bottom of the press. Take this piece, turn it, now you've glued both surfaces, sit it here, and then I just eyeball it to make sure it's there. And if I really am critical, like the taller, when the rings get higher, it gets a little more critical. So I have a little gauge, and I just sit it out here to see where I am, so that all the way around I know that's the distance I want from here to here. If you notice the red lines, I then draw a red line on it when I got it centered, pick it up, because this is on here. I put the glue on here, put the glue on here, and sit it back down. I've also marked a number 1 on this piece and 2 number 1s on the one I'm doing it to, so I know when that's centered I'm back to where I was, so I don't have to remeasure. I just flop it down, pull the press down. You don't need much pressure on this. That's heavy enough, without doubt, probably, to hold that on there. Okay. Let it set for 2 hours, and you come back and you do another one, or 3 hours or 4 hours. Okay. Once you glue this up, what am I going to do with this little thing? I don't smoke pipes, so it's not for that. All right. You wet these down, get them wet, the paper towel, and you run them in between each of these joints. Because the glue, if you don't, see the outside, can you all see that? See, that's a yellow glue showing up. When you do this, you eliminate any yellow glue that's going to show up in your remaining segments. So in between here, that yellow glue is going to disappear. So you have to do the top and the bottom. All right. Fred uses a brush, right, Fred? you get a little brush, do the same thing. But you need to get that out of there. You really do. So I have a whole bunch of pipe cleaners, and I'd probably use this about 10 times and wash it out, and you know, being frugal as I am. All right, so now we have, let's say we have this 8th ring on here, 9th ring on here. Then you go and cut this piece, and this is the one you have to make sure that it's dead on, because if you don't, they're not going to make a ring, it's going to make whatever, hexagon. So then you set this down and do the same thing. Now this, if we had this sitting on here, the ring, this is exactly the perfect setup. This is 18 segments, this is 18 segments, okay? This diameter is the same as this last diameter of this piece. So it sits on there perfectly flat. Now you go back to the lathe and you start turning. I have not had, and I shouldn't say this too loud, knock on wood, I have not had one fly apart on me because of the gluing. And I use a super sharp, very sharp, you know, bowl gouge. And I do the scrape cut. I don't, you know, I don't lead with the, you know, the bevel. I'm scrape cutting the whole thing because it just works better for me. Fred's the only one that knows those. Do you use a bowl gouge or a scraper to do?
I use a round nose scraper.
Okay, round nose scraper. Okay. I use that on the inside because that's more convenient to me. And it works well. It really does. You just got to take your time. You got to get the speed correct. Because if I put this on the lathe and turn it on, it's going to look like it's wobbling a little bit because you can't get it perfectly centered. You know, it just doesn't happen. You got glue between the joints, you're going to get some variation. But it comes out, you know, when you cut it down far enough, you've got a decent looking bowl. All right. Now the one thing we haven't talked about, and by the way, I use pipe clamps to do all my rings. It's just easier for me. All right. The base of these, okay, you start whatever size. This called for a base of 2.963. Why not 3 inches? Yeah, not going to be a difference. So, you know, you can go over here and you can play with this and, you know, mess with it until you get it perfect, or, you know, it doesn't matter. You're going to cut some of this base away anyway. What I do is I make up a waste piece, this block, to fit the jaws, and then I glue paper, newspaper, between the base and this waste piece. And then when I go to take it off, I will knock that off instead of cutting it off. Then I'll put this in the big, what's that thing? Big jaws. I can't, the big silver.
Cold jaws.
Yes, cold jaws, thank you. I'll put that on there and turn the bottom off the way I want it. Okay. So really, in a nutshell, that's it. I mean, it doesn't look simple, but it really is. It's not a difficult thing to do. It's a lot of fun, and you know, the real issue is when you start putting different color woods in, you know, you got to pick your slots so you get that design that you want. So that's why I draw it on the paper. That tornado bowl that I had that had, what, 490 pieces of wood in, I took that apart once because after I got up the 7th row, I had one of those colors out of order. I had purple heart and black walnut mixed, and it was obvious to the eye. I don't know, maybe some people would have noticed, but I noticed it. So I had to take everything apart, which meant turning it down to that row if you wanted to keep it up. So that, you just got to be careful and take your time doing it if you're going to put designs in it. But the designs do make it neater. I will tell you, the open segment, I've had side-by-side sales at the craft show in Annapolis, and I sell 5 open segments to every closed segment bowl. People want them for fruit baskets. That's what they basically are. They certainly aren't going to hold vegetables that are raw, you know, cooked, especially peas. But you know, it's a unique piece when you do it. Anybody have any questions?
What kind of glue you using?
Tight Bond 2. Yeah. Now they tell you in everything you're going to read, you use the white glue because you don't have the colorization from the white glue, but I don't think it holds as well. Plus, it's certainly yellow Type 2 is not waterproof, nor is really Type 3, but it's water resistant, and it's a little better than the white. And I don't care how many times you tell somebody, do not put a bowl in a dishwasher or soak a bowl. I get a call a month later and say, geez, Bob, can you put a finish back on this? I put it in the dishwasher. My wife put it in the dishwasher. Turns out he put it in the dishwasher. You know, every time I've gotten a call, the wife said, it wasn't me, it was him. So if you use that white glue, you're going to be gluing it up again, I think, if you put it in the dishwasher. It gets enough doing. How do I finish them? Okay, you know me and my finish. I use exotic nut oil, and on top of the exotic nut oil, I'll use that beeswax and mineral wax combination from Holland Bowl Company. All right, I think it gives you a good finish. I did buy some walnut oil that I really like to use, but it just takes a long time to dry. Yeah, it really does. All right. Any other questions? Okay, next. It's called Seg Easy, and I got it from Craft Supply. I believe we got them. Yeah. Which, by the way, Rod was telling me this evening, if you notice, most of the companies now are taking 7 to 10 days to get anything to you. And I think it's, like Rod said, Amazon had a new contract with their people, so they've probably gotten slowed down because of the new contract. But
Did you get your wedging board from the same place?
no, yeah, I guess I did. But I bought this. Well, no, I bought this at the Tampa Woodworking Show when I'm down there in Florida. But the Baltimore Wood Show at Timonium, and when's that? January or February, I think. January. Mr. Doobie is about this big. His whole body is the smallest guy I've ever seen. And he does this like the Vegematic. He says, you want an octagon shape? He turns out an octagon shape while you're standing there. And then he has somebody come and say, how many segments you want? A 12 segment? Set the board at 12 segments. He does something unique. He does not, on an open segment you have to, but a closed segment, he doesn't glue between the closed segments. He lays it on a piece of masking tape, sets them down like Fred does his birdhouses, and just brings the tape around and locks it together with a tape, sits it on the next ring and glues here, and doesn't glue between the segments. He's had some beautiful product. But he designed this thing, I think, 25 years ago, I'm not sure. But I think they're around $300 if I'm not mistaken. But you can get left-handed or right-handed, so you got to know where your fence is. You know,
for $300 you can get both of them. Both the left and
okay, maybe you're right. I thought I paid 190. It was more than times 2 to get 300. I don't know if you buy one of them at the show.
Yeah.
He also gives you a video with it. He neglected to send me the video, so that's why it took me so long. It does show you how to do the setups, which can be very nut driving crazy sometimes, because you get where you think you are, because you see this has a lot of open space.
Yeah.
So you got to get that set where you want it to match up with this slide. Okay. So it takes a while and patience to do that. That's really it, guys. It's simple. It's easy. If anybody would like to learn and do this without going to all these expenses if they try it, if you give me a call, we can do a couple days in the shop, and I'll be glad to go through one with you. Just give me plenty of notice when you want to do it. But it's fun. It really is. And in truth, we could cut all the wood for you. You could take it home and put it together. Yeah, if you have the Easy Seg. If you don't have that, then you obviously have to be in the shop. Now, there is, at the back of one of these books, I think it's this one, they have the charts to do a 16 segment, 24 segment, whatever you want. Okay, which you can draw out on a Xerox it and draw it. Yeah, I think Bill, you gave me one of these a long time ago that were drawn out. You made a copy for me. I just got lazy because this is much easier than trying to do this, and it gives you the 8-degree division without any trouble. So, any other questions? That was a quick and dirty, easy lesson, but
All right, thank
very
you,
good.
Bob.